What are the fears that I have in my life right now? I don't like this feeling of fear. Trust. I'm going to trust you, Jesus. I'm going to trust you. I'll tell you something that happened in my own life, and don't be upset. I know this will change your view of me when I tell you this, but before I ever came here, because you guys think I'm very responsible and that I'm always careful all the time, but before I ever came here, I was a pastor in Seattle, and when I was a pastor in Seattle, I led worship. This was about 20 years ago. This year, actually right now, this month, I'm celebrating my 25th year of full-time ministry. So, but back then, something happened to me, and I had an accident. And I know that you're probably surprised by that. But I fell down the stairs at my first church. I was I was coming down the stairs for worship practice. We had like a loft up there, and I was coming down the stairs, and I slipped, and I fell down these stairs, and I broke my leg right before I was supposed to go on a mission trip to Mexico, and which is not good because we used to swim and stuff down there, and so you're like scratching in the it was, but anyway, so I get a ride, and the church secretary dropped me off at the ER. And so I'm at the ER by myself. They didn't even stay, right? They just dropped me off. And I was like, well, appreciate the ride. Thanks. And go in, and there's a line. Here's what I appreciate about Geneseo, is that if you go to the ER here, and listen, I'm a frequent flyer at the ER here in Geneseo. One more accident, and it's all free for me because my punch card is moved. But I've been there a lot. But in Seattle, you go and you wait in line. Like in a big city, if you go to the ER, it could be a couple of hours before they see you. Like I go in there and they're like, "Oh, Mr. Largent, we've got your coffee for you," right? They're ready for me. But here it's a totally different story. Or there it's a totally different story. So I go in and I'm looking at this, and my leg's broke, and there's all these people in line. And I'm thinking, well, when we took him at camp, we took him to go to the ER. It was going to be, 8 hours? I think they wanted it to be 8 hours. It was going to be. And I think that would have been lucky because it was just so many people. But time is kind of the essence, right? Sometimes you got people go in there and they're having a heart attack, right? Coming in with a heart attack. Well, hopefully they'd let the heart attack person go in quick. Now, luckily, I had a gal that went to my church who happened to be in the ER all the time. And she saw that I was there, and she was a frequent flyer out in Seattle. And she said, we're going to let Pastor Dustin go in front of me because she was there every week, right? So she let me go. But one of the things I've noticed is that there are some times in our life where just time is of the essence, and you're afraid. And like if this doesn't happen now, it's going to be really bad. Like you're having a heart attack, right? Or somebody passes out and they're having a heart attack. How long does it take? You guys are medical people. How long does it take? I've heard that there are some times where if time things, like every minute counts, and that you have any of those, any of that? Like every minute, like your chances of survival go down and down and down and down. And so, if you're driving or they're going there and all of a sudden there's a big truck in the way and you can't get there, your time's going and you're like, man, this stupid truck, what's this stupid truck doing there? And you're getting angry and you're frustrated because you're trying to get there because time is of the essence to save your life, and you can't get there because there's some truck or some guy's like all mad. In Seattle, when I lived out there was this gal. I don't know who she is, but there's a canal, and there's a ship canal bridge that goes over the ship canal. And this is not a lie. And this woman, I don't know who she was. All I know is that she was famous because she went on this bridge, and she had had enough of life. And she decided that she was going to jump off this bridge. But she was contemplating it. I don't know if God was working in her heart, trying to get her, don't do this, but if she was thinking about the reasons to live or whatever. Here's the problem. She was ruining traffic. Isn't that sad? She was ruining traffic. There were people that were lined up in traffic miles up the ship canal bridge, and what happened is people started yelling at her to jump. They were, just jump already. Just do it. Just jump. I got to get to work. I'm so busy. I got so much stuff to do, and you're invading on my life, right? Just jump, for crying out loud. On the radio the next day, people were calling in to the radio show, one of the radio shows in town. I think it was on Cairo. And they're calling in, and some of the people felt really bad, because they had been in there and they had seen it and they were apologizing, saying it's horrible. The lady did jump, and she lived. It was incredible. But there were other people that were calling and they were complaining about how inconsiderate it was for somebody to ruin everybody's day by doing that. Do you ever get really anxious and really, like you're so nervous, you're so anxious because something has to happen right now. You're late for a meeting. You're late to get to work. You're late to, you got to get to this place that nobody else matters and none of their stuff matters. And the fact that there's a time restraint on it. Like I got to get to that meeting, and if I'm late, it's going to be bad. I could lose that account. I could lose that relation. There's all kinds of things that could happen, and it causes you all this stress and all this anxiety. And it's mainly because of the time restraint. There's just no time. Have you been there? I've been there. And I'm like, man, we shouldn't live that way. We shouldn't live under that time restraint. Do you know why? Because it's not our timetable. You don't belong to you anymore. Once you gave your life to Christ, you're not in charge of your timetable. You're not in charge of your schedule. You think you do, but you're not. You think you do, but you're not. You're not in charge of that. If you really gave your life to Christ, if you've really given it to Him and said, God, you're in charge of what's going to happen in my life. If you've given your life to Him and said, God, whatever you want to happen, God, use me as a vessel, then you're going to be late. Because I'll tell you, most of the time when God uses you, there's something else you're supposed to do. How many times do I show up and I'm driving down the road and there's an emergency or somebody needs me or somebody calls me on the phone and says, Dustin, we got to talk to you, that I'm doing nothing. Now, I might tell you I'm doing nothing, but I'm doing something. Something's going on. There's always something. And sometimes they say, well, are you doing? Well, sometimes it's an emergency. Sometimes it's got to happen now. Sometimes what I'm dealing with has to happen now. Sometimes what you're happening to has to happen now. Does it? Well, I don't know. Let's look at what Jesus says here in the Scriptures. Look at this. This is crazy. In Mark chapter 5, verse 22, here's where we're coming off of. Jesus goes into town. He's in town, and this guy comes up to him. This guy is he's a religious leader, and he kind of just runs the synagogue services. He doesn't preach or anything, but he kind of runs them, takes care of the grounds, makes sure everything's good, makes sure somebody's there to lead the singing and somebody to preach. But he's got a daughter, and this daughter is like his life, and she's just turned 12, and she's everything to him. I have a 12-year-old. Okay, I have a 12-year-old. Man, he's like my life. I love this kid, man. With him all the time. I can't imagine. But this kid his daughter is at death's door. Like something's wrong, and time is of the essence. And he's tried everything, and he's like the only thing that can save. He's so desperate that he has basically told the religious people by his actions, you know what? I'm willing to just be marred by you. I'm willing to have you hate me. I'm going against everything my religion tells me, and I'm going to go to this Jesus guy because I believe he can heal her. And it's worth that to save her life. And so he comes to Jesus, and he says, Jesus, would you save her? Save my daughter. And it says this in Mark chapter 5, verse 22. We read this last week. Then one of the synagogue leaders named Jairus came, and when he saw Jesus, he fell at his feet. He pleaded earnestly with him, my little daughter is dying. Please come and put your hands on her so that she will be healed and lived. And so then he's waiting in anxiousness. Is he going to come? Is he going to come? Because this is my last shot to save her life. And time is of the essence. Time is of the essence. So Jesus went with him. Jesus picks up and says, sure, I'll go with you. No, I'm busy. I'm doing a lot of other stuff. There's a lot of people here. But sure, I'll go with you. I'll go with you. I'll heal your daughter. And you can just feel the relief come down off of this guy. This guy, Jairus, he's like, oh my goodness. She's going to live. She's going to live. She's going to live. I know. I believe totally that Jesus is going to heal her. But time is of the essence. Let's go, Jesus. Let's pick it up. Let's double step there. Let's move, right? Because she is dying, right? And so we got to get there before that happens. So let's go, Jesus. Let's keep it moving. Keep it moving. And all of a sudden, some woman comes up that's got a flow of blood, a hemorrhaging, and she touches Jesus. And when she touches Jesus, Jesus stops everything and starts interacting, and this woman won't speak up, that she'd been healed, and Jesus is like, who touched me? Who touched me? Somebody touched me because I felt power come out of me, and she's not saying nothing, and everybody's looking around, and meanwhile, Jairus is like, dude, time is of the essence. What is wrong with this woman? She's messing with us. She's keeping you from doing what... My daughter's going to die, and here you are messing around with some blood thing. I don't even care what that is. All I care about is that my daughter's going to die. Jesus, let's go, let's go, let's go. He's horrified. The fear that this guy has to be feeling, knowing. But here's what I find. Look at verse 25. It says, a woman was there who had been subject to bleeding for 12 years. What does Jesus do? He stops and he heals her. But time is of the essence. Why are you stopping? Because his agenda is not necessarily your agenda, and God doesn't care about your timeline. Your timeline and his timeline are not the same. What we find is that once you ask Jesus for something, once you put your faith in him, once you ask Jesus for something, put your faith in him, it's all on his time now. He can do whatever he wants. And so I'll put the first point up here that I want to make is that when Jesus is in charge, you're on his timeline. And you should expect delays. You should expect delays. Here's what I think, as I've thought through this throughout the week, here's what I think we probably need to do more of. I think we need to get up in the morning and say, Jesus, you're in charge of my life, okay? And I'm surrendering it to you, and I want you to speak to me today. I want you to give me signs of things that I could do. I want you to put on my heart to talk to this person, or I want you to put on my heart to call somebody that I need to call this week. I want you to put on my heart to stop on the side of the road if I need to stop for somebody. I want you to put that on my heart, and God, I'm promising to you that I'm going to obey you, okay? See, if you don't do that, if you just, God, please talk to me, and then God talks to you, and you just ignore it, and you never do it, you'll stop talking, right? That's what spiritual growth is. Spiritual growth isn't that I know lots of stuff. Spiritual growth is the stuff I know I obey, and God gives me more. And so God, please, speak to me, give me something to do, and I'll obey, I'll do it. And God, I have a schedule that's planned out, but God, I know it's just a temporary type of all appointments of mine are all soft. Just go into the day knowing that all of your appointments are soft. Actually, as a general rule, this is what we should do as a church, okay? For all of us, if you have an appointment with me, know that I will plan to be there on time unless I am called on another mission somewhere, specifically by God, and I'll tell you about it later. If I don't show up on time, it's because God's got me doing something else. So you say, hey, how's come Pastor Dustin's late? Oh, God probably told him to do something else. He'll be here as soon as he can get here. I'm sure he's on his way, but something's come up. Now, if I just overslept, I'll call you and tell you, right? I'll confess. But just know that you've got to be ready for God to just step in it because God's plans is bigger than ours. Okay? This fits into the whole thing. It says, while Jesus was still speaking, some people came from the house of Jairus, the synagogue leader. Your daughter is dead. They said, why bother the teacher anymore? And so what happens to Jairus? He's been all pumped up. He's excited that his daughter's going to be saved. All of a sudden, this woman's interfering and she's being saved. God's ministering to her. And she's just as worthy of being ministered to as he is. And yet now he looks at this and he's got all these thoughts going through his head. You can imagine the thoughts that you would have. I mean, I can think of the thoughts that I would have. I'm thinking, I'm playing the blame game, right? This is all her fault. My daughter's going to die because of her. My daughter's going to die because Jesus didn't know how to use a watch, right? He couldn't get there in time. He was delaying. All these things are going through his mind, right? And he's wondering, what am I going to do? And it goes from being excited to hopelessness, doesn't it? Right? When your loved one dies, you don't say, well, I'm sure this is only temporary. We don't do that. Everybody I know who has died, except for Jesus, when they die, they stay dead. Everybody I've ever known, every friend I know who's died, they stay dead. And so it is a hopeless type of situation. It feels hopeless. Here's the problem. Jesus said that he was going to heal her. Jesus said he's going to heal her. So now you got to think, all right, well, the hopelessness is there, and the fear of never seeing my daughter again is there. However, I have a promise from God. Which do you believe? Do you believe what you're seeing with your eyes, or do you believe Jesus? Well, this guy kind of goes on. But his friends, your friends will always do this. His friends, what do his friends, all of his friends around him, they're not pointing him to Jesus. They're not saying, hey, just continue to have faith. Continue to believe that Jesus is going to heal your daughter. His friends don't do that. Everybody around him, everybody around Jairus at this point is saying, don't bother. Don't bother the teacher. Your kid's dead. Just forget it. Just leave him alone. It's not going to matter. That's what the world is telling him. And when the world is telling him that, what does Jesus do? Watch what Jesus does here. It says, overhearing what they said, Jesus told him, don't be afraid, just believe. He gives him one job. Don't be afraid, just believe. And here's why he says, don't be afraid, just believe. Okay? He says this because fear and faith don't go together. Fear and faith do not go together. Fear kills faith. Faith kills fear. Okay? Let me say that again. Fear and faith do not go together. They are separate deals when you're dealing with God. Okay? When you are fearful, regardless of that's not to say you're not going to have fear. We all have fears. But fear is cast out by faith. Faith kills fear. Okay? So you're walking through life. This has to do with both, I want to grow in my faith. I want to be less fearful. Okay? You can come at this either way you want. I want to have more faith, Dustin. Give me more. I wish I had more faith. Say, okay, that's good. How do you do that? Well, I want to have less fear in my life. I don't want to be afraid of so many things. I just have a lot of fear. I don't try stuff. I don't do stuff because I'm afraid to do stuff. Well, why is that? You're not doing stuff because you don't have faith. You're afraid. And the reason why you don't have faith, is because you're afraid. The reason you're fearful is that you don't have faith. Right? They go together. Now you say, well, so we're never supposed to be afraid? No. Let me tell you this. If you do not have a relationship with Jesus, if you have not been saved by the cross, if you've not said, you know what, I'm in this world and it's a scary world and everything is just kind of chaotic, I don't have control of stuff and I'm nervous and I'm scared. If that is you and you don't have faith in Jesus, then you should be scared. It is right and honest for you to be afraid. You should be scared. Being scared is a natural response that we have as people because things in the world are scary and things are out of our control and things are more than we can do. That's the point, okay? The point is that we are afraid. It's a scary world, and then we as believers, though, we put our faith in Jesus, and now we have somebody that's in control of all that we say, well, I trust him because he is bigger than all the circumstances, and now I have faith, and that drives out the fear. right? But that doesn't mean you have perfect faith, right? We're growing and we're getting better faith. We're growing, and the more I come and I have these situations where my daughter is dying and Jesus comes, the next time I'm not as afraid anymore because I saw how faithful Jesus was. And now I have more faith in him. So when I'm younger, I'm like nervous all the time, and the older I get, and the more I've seen God work and the more I've seen him do, the less fear I have, right? Because I've seen God do more. I'm like, well, God's going to work through this. God's going to take care of this. God's going to fix this. But watch what he says. This is the command Jesus gives him. He gives it to him right away. He doesn't want him to be paralyzed by fear, because being paralyzed with fear is going to cause him to do stuff that he shouldn't do. Fear causes you to do stuff you shouldn't do, doesn't it? Right? Fear is going to cause him to go in the wrong direction. And so he says, don't be afraid, believe. He's got one job. The way to overcome fear is to believe God, to trust God. That God, boy, I don't get this. Everything looks bad, but I do trust you. And regardless of what happens, I trust you that you're in this. And so I'm going to be okay. And I might have to keep reminding myself of that, right? We're not all like, it's not like we're robots or something, right? That we all just get this and we're all perfect in this. We're working on this. We're like, God, boy, I'm fearful right now. I'm afraid in this. God, how would you have me respond to this fear? What would you do to kill this fear in my life? I'm afraid I'm going to fall. I'm afraid I'm going to give in to my sin. I'm afraid I'm not going to make it. You've called me to something, and you've called me to obedience. And I'm afraid I can't do it, God. But I trust you. And boy, it looks around me like I'm failing miserably. God, but you're with me. So here's the third point. When you are afraid, do this because Jesus said to. All right? Do this because Jesus said, don't fear, just trust me. You say, well, Dustin, that's too easy. That's too easy. You can't tell me that. I'm just the messenger. I'm just telling you what he said. When you're afraid, don't be afraid. Trust Jesus. Okay? Trust Jesus. Here's what David Guzik. You ever heard of David? I read his commentary every week. And from Calvary Chapel, he's a pretty good cat at this kind of stuff. This is what he says. It says, Jesus told Jairus to only believe. Don't try to believe and be afraid at the same time. Don't try to believe and figure it all out. But try to believe. Don't try to believe and make sense of the delay. Instead, only believe. Jairus was supposed to believe the word of Jesus. Everything else told him the situation was hopeless. But the word of Jesus brought hope. You know, astronaut John Glenn, you ever hear him? This is one of my favorite quotes from John Glenn. He was getting into the spaceship, right? Any of you think you could go to like on one of these private ships and go into space? You think you'd be cool with that? No? You're not ready to go up into space on one of these things? I mean, now it's quite affordable. All you need is like, $70 million, and you can just go up for a little trip. I mean, it's bargain basement prices they've got to on this going up. But this is what John Glenn said. He said, I guess the question I'm asked the most often is, when you were sitting in that capsule listening to the countdown, how did you feel? Well, the answer to that one is easy. I felt exactly how you would feel if you were getting ready to launch and knew that you were sitting on top of 2 million parts, all built by the lowest bidder on a government contract. Right? Circumstances will make you be afraid. So let's keep going. We're going to finish this up. We're doing good. It says James chapter 5 or John chapter 5, Mark. The next part of the Bible. He did not let anyone follow him except Peter, James, and John, the brothers of James. When they came to the home of the synagogue leader, Jesus saw a commotion with people crying and wailing loudly. He went in and said to them, why all this commotion and wailing? The child is not dead but asleep. But they laughed at him. So here's a little bit to kind of help you on first century funerals. They were whacked. They're nothing like ours. So first of all, when somebody died, they didn't wait around for a couple of days. They didn't send out announcements. They didn't post it on Facebook to let people know when you're going to pass by and look at the body or anything. They didn't do any of that. They immediately, because the body is going to start to rot immediately, and Jews didn't embalm. So when you read about Lazarus in the Bible, And Lazarus had died, and Jesus comes, and he's talking to Mary and Martha, and they say, Jesus says, roll the stone away. What does she say? She says, dude, we're not rolling the stone away, right? It stinks in there, right? This person is decayed. We're not doing that. That's what happens. So there's a couple things that they would do in a first century funeral. The first thing that they do is that in all of these, everybody that would come to this, and they'd come right away. Like that day the person died, word gets out, and everybody comes, and people would, one of the requirements is you had to tear your clothes. You had to tear your clothes. And if you were a family member, you had to tear your clothes like right over your chest. Okay? Now, you'd be mourning for quite a while, so there were requirements. You could sew that back up, and there were things, but it had to show that you had torn your clothes. So that's why when you read in the Bible and you see people have died or that somebody's upset, first thing they do is they'll tear their clothes. That's because that's a requirement. There's actually 39 rules. If you go 39 regulations on how your clothes have to be torn according to the Jews. Right? So it had to be right over the heart if you were a family member. And then they would hire professional mourners. Can you imagine that being your job? Your job is that you're really good at crying. Right? You're like, you know what? Nobody cries like me, man. I'm the best crier in the world. And they're like, we'll pay top dollar for you. If one of my family members dies, I want you there. So you call them up, and they're screaming. Ladies, that they know how to do it, man. They're just like wailing, right? And you hire that because you want there to be this somberness, and that's a requirement. You got to hire these people to come. And so by the time Jairus gets home, right, he's heard, they're already there. They've ripped their clothes. There's professional mourners. I don't know what you get paid as a professional mourner. I don't know if that you get the big bucks. Do you go to college for that? I don't know. But they do. They also had to hire musicians. And so especially flute players. Flute players would come, and then other musicians, but they would play dissonant notes. Just like notes that were kind of eerie together. So sounds that would symbolize discord and death, right? So you'd play like a C with a chord that doesn't go with that note, right? And you'd make these weird, and you'd just be making these sounds, and people are crying out. And by the time Jairus gets home, this is all happening. And it's just a nightmare. They've already paid. They're already paying people in this whole deal. So watch this. It says in Mark 5, verse 40, it says, after he put them out. What's the first thing he does? Well, he did not let anyone follow him except for Peter, James, and John, the brother of James. When they came to the home of the synagogue leader, they saw a commotion and people crying and wailing loudly. He went in and said to them, why all this commotion and wailing? The child is not dead, but asleep. But they laughed at him, right? They mocked him. They're like, listen, we're professional dead people criers, right? We do this for a living. We know what dead people look like. She's dead, right? And so notice the compassion too, right? Are they concerned about the little girl? No. They go from fake crying to laughing at Jesus. Now it's a big joke. In the span of just a couple seconds, from loud mourning, loud wailing to this guy's a clown. And after he put them out, he took the child's father and mother and the disciples who were with him and went in where the child was. See, does he take those professional mourners in with him? No, because they don't have any faith. They're just mockers of Jesus. They're not going to get the opportunity to see one of the most amazing miracles Jesus will ever do. Take a little 12-year-old girl who is dead. Her heart has stopped beating. She hasn't breathed. She's been dead a while. They're actually mourning her. They've already hired musicians. I mean, they're going through the whole thing. And Jesus is going to raise her from the dead. She's dead, and now she's not, right? He's going to raise her. Is he going to allow people that's laughing at him to be a part of that and to watch that and be in on that? No. He says, I'm going to let 3 of my disciples in. 3 of them, because they're in I don't know if they're in special training or if he's just like, I got to keep a close eye on these guys. I'm not quite sure which one it is for for Peter, James, and John. But he draws them in there, and he lets the parents come in. And he comes in, and this is what he does. It says, after he put them out, he took the child's father and mother and disciples who were with him and went in where the child was. He took her by the hand. Man, that's great. He took her by the hand. Jesus, he doesn't just like say it from a word. He comes up and he grabs her by the, he takes her and he holds onto her hand. Man. In the hands of Jesus, man, that's a great place to be, isn't it? It's the best place that you could possibly be, in the hands of Jesus. There's no need for fear when Jesus is holding on to your hand, right? And he says, Talitha Koum, which is little lamb. That's what he calls. He calls her a little lamb. Little lamb, arise. Arise. And it says in verse 42, immediately the girl stood up and began to walk around. She was 12 years old. At this, they were completely astonished. See, they had faith. But even when you got faith, you can be completely astonished, like blown away by what God would do. It's like you expect it, but when God really does something in your life, wow. Immediately the girl got up and began to walk around. He gave strict orders not to tell anyone about this and told them to give her something to eat. So he does two things after it. This is kind of bizarre. I think this is kind of bizarre. He says, hey, listen, I don't want you telling people about what happened. Now, if it was me, and I just happened to be able to have raised somebody from the dead, I'd be like, hey, free reign, tell anybody, because I'm pretty impressed with myself right now. But not Jesus. Jesus is like, no, don't tell anybody. And I thought about that. Why would he not want people to know? And a couple reasons kind of come to mind. One is, there's a passage in the Gospel of John where they wanted to make Jesus king by force, right? And so that could be, he knew what the people would do if they saw that he'd raised a child from the dead. It could be that this child, he didn't want this child to be a freak show the rest of her life. Hey, everybody, come and see the girl that rose from the dead. And everybody comes and pays $30 to see her. I don't know what it was. But he says, don't tell anybody. And then he told them to give her something to eat. I like that too. That's cool. Hey, you know what? You hungry, little girl? I bet you're hungry from being dead. Yeah, that would make me hungry too. You want a snack pack? Want some pudding? Go get her a snack. Hey, can you get her a snack? Why? Well, she just rose from the dead. We need to give her a snack. So let's look over these real quick. First of all, when we're afraid, what do we do when we're afraid? When Jesus is in charge of you, you are on his timeline. Expect delays. We need to start living that way. That we surrender our life to God. God, you're in charge. And so because you're in charge, I'm going to expect some delays. I'm going to expect that from time to time you're going to call me to talk to this person, or you're going to hold me over a little bit long, and I'm going to be late because somebody's got stuff they got to tell me, or I'm going to do the best I can, but I'm going to expect some delays. I understand that fear and faith, they don't go together. They butt up against each other. They're like water and oil, right? They don't mix. And so fear kills faith. When I'm afraid, I need to recognize, okay, this is bad for faith, right? This is bad for faith. How do I overcome this fear? And how is faith going to help me to do that? I need to trust Jesus. What am I going to trust you in? How are you related to this? And what do I have to believe? What have you told me that's going to help me to not be afraid anymore? The same for faith. When you are afraid, do this because Jesus said to, don't fear, just trust. Trust. I'm going to trust you, Jesus. I'm going to trust you. I'm not going to trust what all the people are telling me. The people that are saying it's hopeless. The people are saying my daughter is dead, that she'll never live again. Don't bother. I'm not going to believe that. I'm going to trust you. I'm going to trust you. When you're afraid, don't look at the circumstances. Look at Jesus. All these people are telling me, these are the circumstances. She's gone. I'm looking around. There's mourners. I'm not going to look at that. I need to look at the fact that Jesus is telling me, come into the room with him because I'm going to heal her. I'm not going to be afraid. And finally, we need not fear because Jesus has demonstrated his power to overcome even the most hopeless of circumstances. I look at the circumstances that I'm in that cause me to be afraid, and I think they're usually not related to death. This was the most hopeless circumstance that we could possibly see. It doesn't get more hopeless than this, okay? So when you go to your own life and you say, all right, is the situation, well, Jesus can do a lot of things, but he couldn't fix this. Because this is beyond what Jesus could do, because this is utterly hopeless. You need to remember that Jesus has demonstrated his power to overcome even the most hopeless circumstances. This is a guy whose daughter is dead and they're mourning professionally outside. And even God is able to even bring someone back from... Now, don't start praying for everybody to come back from the dead. That's not the point, right? The point is that the most hopeless of circumstances, God can fix. You say, but time has passed. God can do things. Well, this person's rejected Jesus over and over and over and over and over again. They're too far gone. Oh, no, they're not. But they hate Jesus. They've joined a satanic cult. Oh, Jesus can still get them. Jesus can still get them. But it's too late. It's not too late. It's never too late with Jesus. I'm going to have the singers come on up. We're going to close up with It Is Well With My Soul. It is well with my soul. And I want us to pray as we're going to leave. We're going to go over here in just a couple minutes to do some baptisms. But fear has a tendency. I want you to know I'm speaking from experience here. Okay, I'm not preaching to you. I'm preaching the truth of what I've experienced myself. I get afraid. Okay, I get afraid of things, and I recognize what that does. And we need to come to Jesus and say, Jesus, how do I handle this? What does this do in my life? And so I want us to take these. You got notes here. Take them. Look them over and say, how do I apply this to my life? What are the fears that I have in my life right now? And does Jesus want me to be afraid of this? Or does Jesus not? How does that affect the way I'm going to respond? How does that affect the way I'm going to walk forward? I don't like this feeling of fear. Well, did Jesus make me some kind of promise about that? And if he didn't, then do I have anything to be afraid of even then? Because Jesus is still in charge of it. I can't control it. It's a part of what Jesus is allowing to happen to me for some reason that he's allowed this. Jesus, we come to you right now and we bring our fears to you. And we know that fears, 90% of the time, the fear is actually lying to us. It's telling us something that's not true, and that's why we're afraid. The fear told this man that his daughter was dead and that she would never live, that he'd lost her forever. But fear was a liar. God, we pray that you would lead us to truth, that we would always be seeking your truth, God, and that when we have fear, God, that we would seek faith, that we would seek you and we would begin to trust you and grab onto whatever we can that'll give us faith to overcome that fear. And we'll do that until our fear is driven away. And God, and when we're not being faithful, when we don't have faith, God, we'll look and say, what are we afraid of? What are we afraid of to follow you and to trust you? Am I afraid that I'm going to have to give up something in my life? Am I afraid that I'm going to have to yield to... that I'm going to have to be a crazy person? Am I afraid that people aren't going to like me? Am I afraid of what people will say about me? I'm afraid of something that's keeping me from faith. God, speak to our hearts individually. Each heart in here today, speak to us. Transform us. Even as we sing this last song, God, we give you our fears. In Jesus' name.
I've seen those wolves gather round, and I've spent some time with the devil.